and I'm Chris Gomez here with my co-host Rich Ross. How are you doing?
Doing well, Chris. How are you?
Good. I love the GitHub cat shimmering in the background. That's cool. I know it's been there, but I decided to comment on it today.
We're kind of we're not really at a crossroad, but what we're thinking is for this thing that we want to do with using Azure Functions, we have two options. We can, stand it up in a new project and go through and do that. What I'd like to do is just say, hey, let's try and see what we can use that Aspire does for us for functions, and let's try some stuff out. I did some stuff, since we last met, just to kind of run through and refresh in my mind, how do we do a function that connects to Cosmo and things like that. So I think we can kind of get there from doing this here. So what I want to do is let's go ahead and do add. Let's go say let's add a new project. So we'll get the project dialog window popping up here. And then from here, I'm going to go ahead and select from my recent templates, because you can see I did this not that long ago. Let's go ahead and bring in the Azure function and hit, questions, pause, let me know what you think. Stop me if I go too fast. But we're going to keep this as part of Project Orbital. And I think for this, we want to call it Orbital to keep it in line with the rest of it. We can't call it API because we've already got one. We could do function, or we could do func API, because that's kind of what it is.
Right.
So,
and that's okay.
I think we can settle with that, right?
Yeah.
And that's going to build that out. So then we have the ability to say, hey, do we want to, when you're doing functions, you have a couple of different ways of thinking about it, right? You have that different frameworks that are in there, but you could do them in process, which means it runs in the same process as the function app itself, or you can isolate it out. So the function app runs in a process and your code runs in a separate process. That is the preferred guidance to do functions, just because it makes it much easier for that application to be updated if the underlying function components get updated dependency, or probably the other way around. It's better for your application to get updated as .NET frameworks change, and there's less of a dependency on having it associated with a certain function runtime. It's probably the better way to say it. So with that, we're going to go ahead, since everything else in here is .NET 9, right?
Yeah.
We're running 9 for everything.
The other thing about the in-process model versus isolated is I don't remember if maybe this got delayed a little bit, or if it was always .NET 8 that was going to be the last one. But the in-process model is leaving us. And
there you go.
At least I'm pretty sure about that. I'll admit that it's been a little while. As you know, I presented on functions a few years ago. Like, I really got into it, and then I have to admit I've walked away for a little bit, and so but if I remember correctly, in process is leaving. In fact, it does say, so I did find an article that I will include in the show notes here. It's differences between the isolated worker model and in the in-process model. That's going to go into the show notes while you're working. And it does say support will end for the in-process model on November 10th, 2026. If I recall correctly, when you're using the in-process model, the way that looks in Azure is it's just a web app. It's an Azure web app. I know, at least I'm pretty sure that's how it is under the covers.
Yes.
And the isolated model is a different, your function code runs as a separate worker process instead of being in the same host. And so in any case, we're going to use isolated for a couple reasons. I think one of them is it's the recommended way to go. And number two, we've already got an end of life for the other model. So maybe not something to adopt.
Totally agree. Okay. So with that, we're going to stick with 9 isolated. We're going to use an HTTP trigger, right? Which makes sense because it is we want it to be an API endpoint essentially. So we've got some URL to hit and make this go. Anytime you have a function, you need to have something defined as the trigger. What kicks off this bit of code that's only going to run to do some kind of a job and then basically turn itself off, what's going to wake that back up and make it run again? And that's what the triggers do. So in our case, we could have an HTTP trigger. There are a whole bunch of triggers inside of here that inside of the Azure environment that you could use to do that. It's where from things from Blob to Event Grid, which is listening for events in your environment, kicking those off, to message queues, all the way out to this one here, which is looking at Cosmo DB and say, hey, something changed in my Cosmo DB database, go fire off this function to go do something in relation to that, right? So we're going to do something a little different to connect to functions, but triggering is how things will get started up. We're going to keep this and list the Aspire orchestration. It's preview, but I think we want to try it out in this project and see how it works. The other thing that we need to do is, hey, let's do the function level. And I think for this one, we're just going to say anonymous. We're going to leave it at that for now.
Right.
I may come back and change that later on. Fortunately, that little drop down, I'll show you where that ends up winding when we create the function. And it's very easy to modify. So let's create that. And can you hear me okay?
Yeah. I mean, I know it's not your ideal setup.
It's not my microphone.
Yeah, but it is working and I can hear you. So, to piggyback on a couple of things that you said there, I think if you're new to Azure Functions, the way it often gets talked about could lead you to believe that like it's an API replacement. It's a serverless API replacement, and it's not, because it can be triggered by so many more things. Like you said, it can be triggered by entries into data stores, whether it's a traditional data store like a SQL Server or even a SQL Azure, or an entry into Azure Cosmos DB or some kind of change. There's timer triggers, and I did a lot of I was really enjoying working with durable functions and some of the patterns there, where essentially with durable functions and that ability to kind of have state between Azure function calls, it kind of was an interesting way to implement a Saga pattern, but not have to own the Saga. Like you just sort of let Azure functions roll between, okay, well, I operate on a timer, and then I kick off this asynchronous process, and then I'm done. But I've got another function that's just waiting for that process to finish so that it can wake up and do the next step.
Yeah. And Saga pattern being that pattern for long-running distributed transactions, essentially, right? So just having a way of, being the acronym police, just kind of mentioning for folks who may be kind of new to that. That's an interesting one to pick up and learn.
Yeah. So I do want to have this comment. We have on Twitch, Blue Spider 7 finally caught you live. I don't know exactly how to pronounce the YouTube username, so I'm going to go with Evans, and hopefully that's close enough, from YouTube. And we both do remember.
Yeah, absolutely.
Left us a very just a tremendous feedback post with different things that both that they've been trying to follow along. I thought that was really interesting and very helpful to know that, hey, people are watching and saying, I think I'll try following along with you folks. So that's definitely influencing on, the curation of the GitHub repo and making sure that trying to make sure that blog posts that we refer to or documentation that we refer to is copied for people. So, it's a two-man operation between the two of us, but it's good to know how people use the episodes, because that influences what needs to be concentrated on, and cannot thank you enough for that feedback. That really meant a lot. So
definitely. It's a lot you give me a lot to think about as I present here as well, and making sure it's always better. We think we're just doing it for Chris and I, because this is how it all started. But there are some great people out there watching, and I'm glad you're getting some value out of it. So hopefully we can get you some value here today with our function. So if you think about the wizard that we just walked through, this is what we get. And a function app is, think of it as a web application, web component that is going to run in some Azure instance. But the important thing is that all of the methods that we put inside of this function run to are all part of the same application. So if I need to spin up and get 10 of these apps, all of those methods and operations will come across with it. There's nothing, I can't say, well, this method here is really important, so that's the one that scales out. No, it'll drag all the other ones with it. So everything we include inside of, our function one here is going to be included as other methods to be able to follow along with. So function one was the default name that it gives the first functions there. We're going to be a little more explicit about it. We're going to say, hey, this is our get messages, right? So this is really what this function is going to do. Think of a function as, an API URL endpoint that we're calling out to. I mentioned, we've got that anonymous part of that we assigned that gets defined here. If we want to change it, it's very easy just to do, hey, let's do the admin or the function or the system mechanism, right? Function is, basically having a function key that include the master key. So there's a key for the function itself, but then there's an overall master key, I believe, for the application that runs. So that's what that one needs, because it needs that higher level of permissions. And then system, which one's that? Using a system key or using a valid user authentication token. That is what we're going to wind up having to use here. I'm going to leave that in there for a minute. And I'll explain why as we start to make the connections out to the services. Okay. One of the things that I know we need to include, let me do this here. Let's do this inside of Visual Studio. We'll do it the right way. Tools. We're going to get our NuGet package manager, and let's bring up our manage the packages for the solution. I want to browse. We're going to browse for Microsoft.extensions. This is where I'm going to probably get in trouble a little bit, because there's extensions that if I was just building a function, I could use those extensions. There's also Aspire related functions that we might need. So we can do one of two things. Let's do this. Let's bring Copilot. Let's bring up a new chat window.
Is this because you're saying that there may be some differences between, like, hey, I'm just going to get this working and have the app call it, and the Aspire integration?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. Let's do this. Edits. Move over to here so we have that focused. Come on back. Morning. Can I do this? Hang on.
Did you really say good morning to Copilot?
Yes.
I didn't realize that's where we were at with our co-pilots now. No, it's okay. I don't mean to make fun of you.
There was actually a post that I believe it was Sam Altman had said that, saying please and thank you and those happy salutations to the Copilot, because everybody thinks that puts you in the right frame of, or puts the Copilot in the right frame of mind for the conversation, leads to some inordinate amount of expenditure, because each one of those is a couple tokens in cost. Right? I don't know. I get better answers when I'm more positive and have a good interaction with the Copilot.
So, okay. I was gonna say, so basically, it's like how our modern hybrid vehicles, and even heck, some gas-powered vehicles shut off at the stoplight. This is the equivalent of leaving it running, right?
I'm the old school gas guzzler. There you go.
Just leave it running. This is a couple tokens.
That's funny.
What's a couple tokens between clouds?
Exactly. It all comes out in the wash. All right. So with this here, I'm going to do a couple other things. So we'll try GPT-4.1. That's going to be the new base model. So instead of 4.0, 4.1 is going to be the way we talk to things. But I may want to jump up and do something like Claude Sonnet. But I think for this one, we're fine, just because it should be some basic knowledge. But what I am going to do is I really am going to talk to it. So let me try this here. Copilot, can you provide the right extension for the function app that we're using to connect to CosmoDB? There we go. Did work. You just have to think about it. So I can do that. It's going to go ahead and create the plan. It's doing the create plan bit because we're in the edit mode. So ask is kind of like, hey, we're just having a conversation. Help me explain my code. Help me understand and describe what's going on. When we get to edit is a little more hands-on, where it's actually able to say, well, I can help you. And not only can I help you, I see your code base, and I can actually start to make those changes. So that's what it's done. So basically it wants to add the Azure Functions Worker Extension NuGet package.
Okay.
Which was the one we were looking at. And I think that is the one. I think it's fine. I think it's the one that we'll use here, and then update the function code to do the Cosmo binding as needed, right? So let's do this. So there you go. It's dropped in our package. We're going to say, cool, that's fine. We'll keep it. And in the function side, it's going to go ahead and actually do the update for us here. So it's given us a couple things. It's given us, a reference to a worker and our Azure Cosmos instance, which, okay, I can see that. Oops, sorry. Let's do tab except for that. This one, I'm doing what everybody should do, right? This is the red line here in this section. This red block here is what it's going to get rid of, and the green block down here is what it's going to add. So you'd want to take a little bit of time, review what's going on. So it's going to basically get rid of what I currently have for the beginning of this method declaration and include, cool, that didn't come through.
Yeah, I know. You always wonder what you're about to get doxed on with IntelliSense or
Yeah. Well, that was my team's message behind the scenes. So
fortunately, even better.
Dev box.
So yeah, it's going to give an example input binding, but comment it out for you. Right,
and the input binding is important, right? If we see what's here, so I'm going to go ahead and accept that, and we'll talk through it. Oh, it actually commented it out. That's interesting.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. Well, let's just do this, and we'll do the Control K, Control U, and there we go. Oh, don't need that.
Right. I think, yeah, okay.
Comma, and Cosmo DB input. What are you complaining about there? Nope, doesn't want that. Oh, I got too many commas.
I think it still doesn't know.
Yeah. All right. Hang on. I see what you're saying. Let's see this. Okay. Cosmo DB input. That should be. Well, let's just.
What I'm wondering is what Cosmos DB input must be. There must be a reference missing.
Yeah. which I thought
And
was Microsoft Extensions
well,
Cosmos.
did we add the Azure Functions worker extension? Which I'm not
Yes,
sure
we
if that's
did.
what it's telling you. Okay, but what about in the CS proj? Azure Functions worker extensions Cosmos DB. Yeah, okay. And then
it's here already.
right.
So delete that. That's not the answer. What's this one? No, I think it's making it worse. Okay, forget that.
So
yeah, what are you thinking?
This is the Cosmos DB input attribute is not its own attribute, and that maybe you want to close off the trigger. So right now the trigger, I don't remember what the trigger looked like before, but
so you mean like that?
No, I think.
Oh, you want to put it after? No, this is this.
See, the issue here is I'm trying to figure out if that's an attribute that goes. I don't know that it's a parameter attribute. I'm thinking it might be like a method attribute. So.
Oh, you mean up here?
Yeah. Just because I'm looking at an example where it appears to be a method attribute that's in the class. Yeah, which is where we're at. We're in the class declaration. So.
Yeah. So you're saying let's take this.
Right. And maybe put it under function. But see, it still doesn't seem to know what Cosmos DB input is. Yeah. And it's not offering a using statement.
No, it's not offering any help like that. It just wants to fix with Copilot, which wasn't entirely helpful around that. So let me do this. Azure Functions.
Oh, for one thing,
Cosmos DB. Yeah.
Cosmos DB input versus Cosmos DB output.
Yeah.
I don't know the difference between these things. So I don't even know.
Oh, okay. Let's do this then. Let's take a step back. When we talk about Azure Functions, the thing I always a couple of things I think are awesome. Triggers is one, but the bindings is the other. And the binding gives you the ability to connect to a bunch of different Azure services oftentimes on both the input and on the output. So for example, in our case here with Cosmo, we can say input bind to Cosmo DB based on the SQL expression, which basically means as when that function gets triggered, what I'm going to be able to have access to is all of the Cosmo DB items. I'm looking at the wrong camera. All of the Cosmo DB items that are essentially that come back from that query. So that's the input. Now with that, in my function, I can do all kinds of different things with them. I can iterate over them. I can modify them. All I want to do is just basically take that collection and send it back to whoever called me, because that's what my API is doing. It's getting me all the message documents. So that's what the input binding is. On the output, if we think about when we want to write something, we might send a JSON payload up to that API, to that function endpoint, and say, this function is my post message or post meeting. And what's going to happen is everything that's in my JSON payload is going to map to a new document or an upstart document that I create in Cosmo, and that's the output of my function, is that it writes that document to Cosmo DB. So the input and the outputs are very important. And you think about it, basically just by putting that little decoration in there of saying, hey, it's this database, it's this container, here's the SQL code and the connection string, I don't have to worry about finding, creating a Cosmo client or getting down to the container level and all that, right?
I guess that makes sense.
The offset.
And okay, that makes sense. And so I didn't understand that there was a Cosmos DB input and a Cosmos DB output. So I think I might have led you the wrong way, because when it comes to input, which is for reading, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then I think it is a parameter attribute. But what I find odd is that it's not picking it up in terms of an attribute that it can use, which just makes me wonder, like, what's missing in terms of...
Same. So
go ahead.
So I'm just going to run through this. So if we look at, here, this we know we got, right? We got everything in, when it comes to Azure Functions, there's a Microsoft.Azure.Functions.Worker.Extension for whatever it is that we're trying to bind to. Okay, so in this case, we can go back to our project and see that we've got, the matching Cosmo DB version of that, right? So .star, in this case, we're placing the star with Cosmo DB. So that's for our isolated worker model, like we have here. If we go down, so we have our extensions, and that is in the right place.
Right, yeah.
So it should be after that. So I'll move that back in a second. But I feel we're missing something that gives us that connectivity to Cosmo. And it may be fooling us a little bit. So if just take a look here. All right, so first thing I want to do is I want to bring that back down. Okay, so now we got this here, got a connection. We don't really have a connection yet, so maybe that's what it's. It is the type of namespace it doesn't like.
Yeah, it just doesn't know that. It doesn't know.
I mean, that's right.
We said Azure Functions, Worker Extensions, Cosmos DB. I think you...
Yeah.
For the isolated worker model, is it different than the in-process model?
No, so we're in the isolated worker model here.
Yep.
So that's the good one. Also, otherwise noted example is this example contains that. That's fine. It should. And it wound up in the right project, right? Because this is our function API project. So that's in the right spot.
Now, let's see. You saved this project file?
Yeah. Oh, wait a minute.
I'm just trying to think of what, because I'm trying to figure out if maybe the package hasn't been downloaded yet.
Good call. At least there you go. That was it.
So if you're wondering, the confusion was, there are many ways to add NuGet packages to your project. You could go into manage NuGet packages in the UI. You could do it that way. You could go to the package manager console, do it that way. You could go out to the command line and say .NET add package. All of those will do one. They all have one thing in common. Not only will they add the line of code to your CS project, they'll activate the package retrieval. We added the line of code to the CS project, perfectly valid, but Visual Studio didn't bother acting on that until you saved the file.
Yeah, and that was my bad for not.
It's easy to overlook because, depending on what your normal workflow is, you may or may not to do that, right? And so right now, it looks like you don't even need that right now.
I don't think so.
Okay.
But
so the point is now,
this.
You said this earlier, but it comes across a little bit now that I'm seeing you fill out the attribute parameters while you're working here. This is what comes across to me now. When we've been working with Cosmos DB clients on our own, quote unquote, we've had to supply database name, container name, all this stuff, and we've had to create a client and include it in dependency injection and all that. And we're kind of what's happening here is that attribute just took all that.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, if we go back to...
And the key that I want to make sure I really zero in on, for somebody who's maybe watched previous shows or said, hey, I really like that, and then they want to go back and use it somewhere else, that attribute, I believe, is coming, it looks like it's coming from the Cosmos DB extensions for functions.
Yes.
So this is an Azure Functions helpful feature.
Yeah. It's because, we get that input binding and output binding if we want to take advantage of that too, right? We could also, it's part of the same method, but we certainly could. Where's this?
That's now, here. Without digging into it, having dug into it, this is really helpful. So I'm wondering, though, if it's not just helpful because the team that worked on this is just the nicest people ever, but also a little bit out of necessity because of what we're doing. The Azure function is self-contained. It can run isolated. It's not like it's running in the context of a larger server with a program CS and a program CS and a host application builder and the whole pipeline. Like, none of that is here. So there isn't an opportunity to add this service, add the client, set up dependency injection. Like, I part of me is thinking you need something to let you get to that same starting point that you would have had in a web application, but instead have it here in a function app. I think. I haven't dug into any of it, but
no, I think you're right. All of that, if I understand right, I think you're right, because by doing this, you're basically, all of the stuff I would have to hand write myself, the extension method is taking care of it for us.
Right.
Okay. So we're going to keep that there. We'll get a bunch of items, and how are we doing? We're getting close on time here. Let's just do this. Functions. No, we want to. And then I think inside of here, I can just have some object with a value, and then I just want to. Oh, well, they're not items per se, right? They are. Let's do this. Var meetings is equal to and that needs to get resolved by core.
Right.
Nope.
You need a reference to core in this project, I think.
Yep. Oh, because it doesn't have,
which it might do for you. I thought it'd be cool if it did it for you, or you can use our favorite new trick and grab
drag and
core and drop it into.
There we go. Cool. So now we got that. We got the meeting, and then yeah.
Now, the code you got from the assist gave you back an IEnumerable of dynamic, maybe because it didn't know better. Are you able to change that to an IEnumerable of meeting?
This here?
Yeah.
Because that's where it came from. I think it was trying to infer that, hey, you probably want to do something with this.
Right.
Anyways,
I'll let you keep going.
That would be interesting, right? Just to be able to say this here. Because then we should just be able to, then we don't need this.
Yeah.
And returning the object result gets us, move. Stop. Items, right?
Right.
Yeah. What could go wrong?
So there's a lot that we're hoping works here, including.
Oh, absolutely. And it won't get completely the way there because
we don't have a
so here's the other.
Okay.
Yeah, here's the other thing that I have in place right now. The way this works, the way my environment works, is that I can't just drop a connection string in. I have to. It wants me to be a little more secure in how I do it. So I'm doing it based on my permissions that I have into my Azure environment. And that's kind of how we're set up here for a developer, essentially. So we go to Cosmos DB and I go to this one, because this is where our Orbital data is. All right, so I've got a couple different things, but I got here, Orbital, meetings, items, and you see I've got 3 items in there. And only number 3 matches up with as that structure that we started to create for meetings, right? So if we go back a few episodes out, we started to do that. Let's go here. Inside of solution, those functions, localhost settings. Right, so in here, inside of the values, I could go ahead and put a I'm just going to call it connection because all I need to include in there is this, which is the URI to where that goes. That's all I need, because what happens is it's going to use my credentials or my who I'm logged into essentially to Azure.
Like the AZ login stuff, basically. Okay.
Exactly. So you've got to have an AZ login in place. I'm not going to show those here.
Right.
Need that. We're going to save this. Go back to our function.
Yeah, I feel like we explored all that. We explored all that one time with in order, because that creates an Azure credential that you operate as locally. And so and again, I'm not 100% sure how it all works, but then anything you use in Azure is going to pick this up. And so it's kind of a way as a developer for you to work with as if that was your managed identity, I guess.
Exactly,
because you're local developer. Yeah.
Yes, because what will happen is when you move this to Azure, you will have a managed identity up there, and it goes through, much like we saw with when we did the configuration settings. As like when you have configuration settings here or here or here or here, the identity is doing the same thing. Well, do you have an AZ account that's signed in? Do you have a managed user account that's signed in? Do you have, and it gets to the point where there's an order to it, and then as it goes through the order, it's like, okay, this one, let's go.
Now, is this because this trigger is authorization level user compared to some of the other options where it would be more API key based?
Yes, exactly. And because of some things that are locked down in this environment that I have, I can't use those without going into the Azure CLI and saying,
"Yep,
we're gonna just do this as a local admin." Excuse me, essentially. So I don't want to turn those off. I want to use it the way that we're supposed to be using it. So
there's a lot of things I really like that I'm seeing so far. For one, everything's green. That's cool. Because, you actually did quite a bit when you think about it. Added a new project, connected it, or at least set up bindings for Cosmos DB. And not only that, not only is it Cosmos DB, it's not the local ones that Aspire is using, right? It's not the local preview emulator. You're connected to a version in the cloud, which is fine. And it's green.
It is.
So I guess all we want to do now is call it.
So let's come here. So
because
that's the endpoint, and that's fine.
Yeah, because it's a get trigger, we should be able to just do this in the browser. No. Would it hit a breakpoint?
It would. It should. Why is that not there?
Okay. Yeah, that was interesting that it didn't even.
Oh,
is it?
Because I'm done.
Oh, it's called get messages.
I don't know why.
certainly the naming and everything we can all work out, but
Yeah.
I think, yeah, we didn't have a. So by calling it that trigger name is what it's expecting. Is it expecting? Is it
It does
expecting
expect
slash
the API in the middle. Yep.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Oh, one other thing. Okay. That's right.
Good. I'm glad. Because I was gonna say, I'm running out of ideas.
That's okay. So it's not completely a connection.
Oh, okay.
So account endpoint, boom. Oh, sorry. Back here, that, quote that. Just give me one. Awesome. Okay. And that is now. Why are you complaining? Maybe it's not. Oh, because there's this one. There we go. Okay. That makes sense. All right, let's rerun it.
So the local settings file that you're looking at there, what is that called? Local.settings.json. Is that kind of like I don't want to call it an app settings, but kind of like one because you'd only run it locally. In Azure, when you actually deploy up to Azure Functions, you would set that environment in Azure Functions, or maybe it would pull it from configuration management or whatever.
Yes. So what's cool here is that although I have a setting in there for Cosmo DB, and I'm only using the account endpoint. I'm not using a full-on connection string or anything like that. That's all I need to provide. I don't need to come over here and say it's Cosmo DB dot or double underscore or colon, whatever it is, that attribute. It will figure that out.
Okay.
Because if you do that, it then says, it starts looking for whatever you put there, double underscore account endpoint. It's going to go look for that in the thing. So that will work. So let's go back to here. Let's try and claim victory.
Yeah.
As we are a little bit after.
This would be great if this worked. Does the capitalization matter?
Here?
No, for get messages. I just don't know if it does.
It doesn't.
Okay. It's weird because it doesn't seem to be hitting this breakpoint.
Exactly. That's where I am as well.
And you're getting a 404, not like a 403 saying that you're not authorized.
Yeah, I'm not getting. Well, let's do this because it might make it a little better to figure out. Solution.
An HTTPS file.
Yeah, I know I've got one in here. Under the API tester. Target machine actively refused it.
So it's 7065. Is it HTTP or HTTPS?
It's HTTP.
Okay.
Yeah, I got that from here. Actively refused it.
So we know that that's running. At least Aspire says it's running. It's just like right now, the way it's acting is like it's just not listening. Right?
Yeah.
Like that's the response you're getting is like I'm not listening at 7065 instead of being like a 404 or something. Is it possible to just run the function app?
I suppose so. We could basically start that up.
Yeah.
And well, it's the same thing. I did the same thing there. Okay.
Except you didn't call it. It wasn't called account endpoint. Over there, it's called account endpoint instead of. Yeah. That's the whole. I wonder, does it accept the nested? I guess it does, right? Because that's the way that you nested parameters, I think, on Linux machines, right? Is what their default.
Right.
Okay.
And we can try and see if it makes a difference. I don't think it will, but wow.
And now I think you have one extra. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
Now, is that space going to be a problem there? Probably not. I hope not.
Oh, here?
Yeah. I don't know that it'll be a problem.
Why am I doing this here? Sorry. I totally refused it. Shoot, that's not what I want. Go away.
Like my feeling is you'd get a 403. I could be wrong, but that's just my feeling.
I think you're right.
Is that if it had to do with authorization, it would be you'd get a 403 response. This feels like the port's just not open, and it makes me wonder if is there something in Aspire that's like running the app but the port's not open. And I'm not blaming Aspire. I just something about the setup that maybe just isn't 100% complete versus just running it.
Yep. Does it start up? No, those are good calls. Okay, so we get it run here with function core tools.
Function core tools, which is cool. And it's saying that it's using the same exact. See that it's saying I'm using the same thing you are, and it looks like it wants to work. Okay, so instead, so we know that it got called. Of course, right. Oddly enough, I don't know if you still had a breakpoint set because it didn't seem to trigger. But some exception was thrown here.
Yeah.
And maybe part of the exception has to do with the Cosmos DB input. Like perhaps that's just not set up 100%. I don't know.
Yeah.
I was hoping that wasn't it.
Yeah.
I was like, please tell me that that space isn't the end of it. But Oh,
That might have
hold
been
on.
it.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
did you
So
skip by it?
let's see.
And
I
then
did.
no,
There you
there they
go.
are. There they are.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's what we did is ran the functions app on its own. We're not 100% sure if the local settings needed to be changed the way we did away from nested parameters to the __ for nesting. We don't, I don't think we know that. We could always set it back and find out. And we don't know because I don't think we've done anything that would affect the run out of .NET Aspire. So we don't know if there's maybe just a little bit to do there to get it all running in .NET Aspire. But what I at least appreciate is, at least from soup to nuts in this episode, we have a functions API that connected to our Cosmos DB, retrieved the meetings and returned them just the way, very similar. I don't know if it's exactly identical to the way the API is doing it, which means we should be able to get to a place where we can hook up the Blazor app.
Right.
And at least we're ending on a good note where it worked.
Yeah. That is. Yeah. I'll have to, so we'll have to see what. Yeah, we'll have to see. I can back into that because it should work. I mean, granted, it's preview, but from what I understand, that what we did there should work inside of an Aspire app.
Right. There's other interesting things, I think, like, for example, you're logged in, you used AZ login to establish your default Azure credential. For me, this is the point where I would go log out just because I want to see it fail and say like, oh, yep, 403. It's you know, it's not going to allow me to access it. And then, you know, because that's just the kind of things that I end up doing just to convince myself that it's all working the way it's supposed to. Like, I'd like to think that this would give you an unauthorized. And then if it doesn't, there could be other reasons, but which I don't know. So Visual Studio might be providing that credential for you, because I there was a time when I really had this wired, because in Visual Studio you connect through your Microsoft accounts connected.
Yes.
And I feel like that establishes a default credential. So the reason I remember really trying to dig into all of this was because it can seem mysterious. And so then you as a developer are like, I don't know why it's working. It works on my machine, which is not a place I like to be. I want to know why something's working, so that way, when you have a real problem in prod, you know, you're like, well, these are the things that make it work. So let's go down that list, versus, I don't know, it just works on my local desktop.
Yeah. Cool.
So, all right.
We got there. But I think you're right. I think that's why it's still authenticating. It's because I'm signed into Visual Studio itself.
So unfortunately, I wasn't watching the comments because I had it full screen. But like, I think this was when Blue Spider 7 was when we were at the same place where it was saying that the port was refused. I think, like, so as we saw, what we ended up doing was running the Functions API separately for now. We'll get it all working in the app host distributed integration. But for now, I have to go see if I can catch up what happened in stand-up. So we'll be getting out of here in a hurry, but I want to thank everybody who watched us live. And if you're watching us on YouTube in the future, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed it, hit the like button, leave us any comments or questions. I do intend to later today, I'd like to go in and cut out some of the dead space, but other than that, just appreciate everybody watching. So let's see if I have everything set up here. I think I do. So if that's it, Rich, thank you for driving that Chris. Today. Really appreciate it, especially under the technical issues that started right when the show started. I just appreciate you working through them all. And so for Rich, I'm Chris, and we will see all of you next time on the Dev Talk Show.